Welcome to Two Witness Teaching Program. Two Witness, a Bible teaching program to change and transform people. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Let's dive into it.
Now, the reason why is in the first 7 weeks, or 49 years, that's when the Jews rebuilt their wall and city in this chunk of time here. But they rebuilt the temple, and they were waiting for their Messiah for these 62 weeks. And in the last week, he was manifested. And his ministry was that last week in which the middle he was cut off after 3.5 years. 3.5 of 7, 3.5. So I'm pointing this out because it sounds, if you just add the time up together and you see in verse 25, 7 weeks and 62 weeks, well, 69 weeks the Messiah comes, and then in 62 weeks he'll be cut off. It doesn't seem to make sense. It does if you keep those separations. He's talking first there's a 7 and a 62, and it's after the 62 that in that final week where he's cut off. So hopefully I didn't make things more confusing. Because it was a big revelation to me when I understood why verse 26 said after 62 weeks that he'd be cut off. It seemed like it didn't match 25, but it does if you keep that segregation. There's a 7 and a 62 and a 1. A couple other pieces of information here. In verse 26, in that last week when Messiah is cut off, he's not cut off for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. They're going to destroy Jerusalem. They're going to destroy the temple. And the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. The people of the prince is, the prince there is Jesus Christ. And the people of the prince, the ones that Lord Jesus Christ comes to direct, are the Romans. The Romans are going to come and destroy Jerusalem and destroy the temple. And we can prove that with his word. In Matthew 22, verse 1, Jesus gives us a parable where by the end he says he's the one that's going to come and destroy the city. Matthew 22, 1 through 7. Matthew 22, 1. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again by parables, and said, The kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king, which made a marriage for his son, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding. He's calling the Jews, his own people, to come, but they would not come. And again he sent forth other servants, other prophets, saying, Tell them which are bidden, Behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready, come unto the marriage. But they made light of it, and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his merchandise. And the remnant took his servants, and entreated them spitefully, and slew them. But when the king heard thereof, he was wroth, and he sent forth his armies, and destroyed those murderers, and burnt up their city. So here we see in verse 7, God is saying, I'm the one that's directing the destruction of Jerusalem. When the Jews will not come, will not accept their Messiah, the king was wroth, and he sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burnt up their city. Now the one who did it was Titus, a Roman prince. He came, and under his direction and leadership, the Romans sacked the city, and over 1 million were killed, slaughtered by sword. They were starved out and then slaughtered by sword, and another million were dispersed into all of the earth. But we see here that God's taking responsibility. He's saying, I'm the one who's directing this judgment. He led Titus to bring about that judgment on the Jews. And there's really interesting confirmations of that in extra-biblical sources with Josephus. It's very interesting to read some of his writing that he at times says it's inexplicable, the actions of Titus. Titus comes against the city, and Jesus warns the Christians in Matthew 24, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out of the city, go to the mountains and save yourself. And he'll sustain his people in the hills of Judea. And Josephus said Titus came up to the city like he was going to take it, and he just backed off. He said for no reason whatsoever, he took off. He went back. And then he changed his mind and came back. That was giving just enough time for the Christians to get out of the city. They recognized the sign, Jerusalem surrounded by armies. This is the time for judgment on the Jews. Let's get out. And they did. Josephus said the Christians left the city. They recognized the warning that Jesus gave them. They went to the hills, and then Titus came back. But he says, as far as Titus is concerned, he left for no reason, and he came back inexplicably. So, very interesting for Josephus to say that. And he was chronicling the wars for the Romans. Mm-hmm. And he said, for no reason that I know of, Titus left and Titus came back, and that gave the Christians just enough time to get out. So everything happened just as God had foretold, but the main point in verse 26 is to understand that the prince reference there is the same prince as Messiah, the prince that's referenced before. Mm-hmm. Verse 25, Messiah the prince. Verse 26, Messiah is cut off, and the prince that shall come, still the Messiah, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So all of this gets fulfilled with the coming of Jesus Christ, his death, his resurrection, and judgment that comes on Jerusalem is the final thing that happens in regard to this 490-year prophecy. So it's all completed, wonderfully completed in Jesus Christ. There's nothing about the future to us left in this prophecy. And I think that's the truth of the passage of this chapter. I don't think I need to go into any of the false teachings. If you've all been through that in end times, and you know how this has been distorted. People have broken up this prophecy, put things into the future, but that's not fair to God's Word. And it all fits exactly and perfectly. If you keep it intact, it's all fulfilled through Jesus Christ, and then the judgment that came on the Jews for not receiving their own Messiah. Is there anything you think we should add to that?
Are there any questions? I think that would be good before we go on. Okay. All right, just to make a note, at the beginning of chapter 9, which Brian just read, this was the first year of Darius ruling in Babylon. Remember when Belshazzar, the last king of Babylon, fell, the handwriting on the wall? He was slain that night, and Darius the Mede ruled in his stead. So that was the fall of Babylon, the rise of the Medes and Persians. It was Darius who reigned first, not Cyrus. So Daniel sees, okay, the 70 years have come to an end. Babylon has fallen. Now he's seeking God. What's next for our people? Well, we start in chapter 10. The next chapter, it says it's the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So this is after Darius. Now Cyrus comes into the picture, and so when 9 was written, or when it played out, they had not been released from captivity to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. In chapter 10, I don't know that it has happened yet, but we see now we're into the period of Cyrus reigning. So in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. And the thing was true, but the time appointed was long. and he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine into my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. And in the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is Hiddekel, then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. Now, we do know, we're going to see in verse 11, he was specifically sent from God, and most people believe this would be Gabriel because it was Gabriel that came to him in chapter 9, but it doesn't say here. Verse 7, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone, and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me. For my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. Yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then was I in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. And behold, a hand touched me, which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. And I can picture this. Daniel would have been a very old man, at least in his 90s, I would think, just overwhelmed by the glory of God and the presence of this messenger of God. And he strengthens him, and he's sitting on his hands and knees. Verse 11, he said to me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright. For unto thee am I now sent. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood trembling. Well, then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. So what was the first day? How long had he been praying and seeking God? 3 full weeks, it says in verse 2. So he says, for 3 weeks I know I've heard your prayer. Verse 11, he says, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, or 3 weeks, the whole time you've been praying. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. So we see God is revealing to him a little bit of the spiritual side of how he sets up kings, how he brings down kings, how he's working with the hearts of men. And we talked about this earlier. There was a really good way that Brian explained it. He's like, oh great, she's deferring to me again. About how God providentially causes things to happen, but still working with ungodly men who want their own way and their own will. And God has his people and his methods of accomplishing this. And he's showing Daniel some insight onto how this is happening.
Right. And it could even take time for God to work out something himself in the best way possible. So that's what we can get out of this. Sometimes it takes God even time to do something in the best way. So it took this angel some time to get to Daniel with the answer to his prayer. Now God's going to succeed. There's no question about that. He's going to succeed. But it took some time for him to get it done in the best way. And so that's something for us to understand as we go forward. Mm-hmm. God hears us immediately. But sometimes he's working out the best way to answer our prayer, and to get us the message takes a little bit of time.
Because he's working with other men.
He won't fail. Absolutely. He won't fail. But he'll get us the answer, but sometimes it takes some time for God to work it out. He's dealing with people, and that's what he's saying here. I was dealing with people, but I've come through and I've got the message for you.
Verse 14. Well, now I'm here. Now I'm come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days. So this is what's coming, but what I'm going to tell you is going to play out over time. Verse 15, when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground, and I became dumb. And behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. And I opened my mouth and spake, and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remained no strength in me, neither is there breath left in me. Then there came again, and touched me, one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me. And he said, O man, greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee. Be strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. Then he said, Knowest thou wherefore I come to thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. Now, the Persians had just come into power, right? And we see he's giving him this idea about his role in it. And he says, I'm going back to fight with the prince of Persia. But he says, once that's done, once Persia has filled up their cup or fulfilled the purpose that God has for them, the prince of Grecia shall come. And we know from history, Greece, or those under the banner of Greece or Macedon, are going to conquer the Persians. We've already seen that in chapter 2, 7, and 8. But, verse 21, I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth. And there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael your prince, or is on his side, or continuing with him. He says we're on the same side to accomplish the purposes of God. Now we pick up in Daniel chapter 11, which is going to continue right from the end of chapter 10, where Gabriel, supposedly Gabriel, is speaking to Daniel, and he says he's working with the kings and the princes of this world. He says he's going back to fight with the prince of Persia. And in chapter 11, verse 1, he says, Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. So he is God's messenger working with the kings of this earth to accomplish God's purposes. As much as the kings want to think that they are doing their will, that they often, we've seen the kings of Babylon, they stood up in their pride saying, look at all of the mighty accomplishments I have done, and God judged them for their pride. He says, you are but a tool in my hand. And so we're seeing more of that here. Verse 2, Now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now this is what's going to happen through Darius and Cyrus and into Artaxerxes. This is when we get into the time of Esther and her husband, Xerxes, who is now going to start following in his father's footsteps and fighting with the Greeks and all the battles between the Greeks and the Persians, just to give you some context. Verse 3, And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will, or to his own will. Now, in 2 verses, we've gone all the way through the empire of the Medes and the Persians, and now we have Alexander the Great. He is the mighty king who is going to stand up. And what was he called in the other chapters? Was he the notable horn, or the large horn, he-goat with the large horn? In some of the other chapters, we've already talked about him. So Alexander the Great is going to rise up. Verse 4, the next verse, we have the fall of Greece, the fall of Alexander. When he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, not to his posterity. His offspring will not take his place in rule, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. His kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. And we've talked about what those 4 kingdoms are. And you'll see on my lovely detailed map of the Mediterranean, these are the 4 winds, or the 4 kingdoms that this empire of Greece, or Alexander the Great, had fallen into. One is called Greece, Asia Minor, which is today Turkey, Syria, which is where we would see like Canaan and Jerusalem, and then Egypt. And what we want to make a note of here are the main players. And Egypt was taken over by a general, I know we did some of this before, named Ptolemy. And Ptolemy the First was the beginning of a dynasty, a ruling family called the Ptolemies that are going to rule for many years. In Syria, we have a general named Seleucus. I think there's an E there. Seleucus. And so this dynasty or ruling family are going to be the Seleucids. Most of this chapter is going to reference the battle between these 2 dynasties over a period of many years. Now,
Can I label this for you?
sure,
I think it's Greek Empire after Alexander.
right, thank you. This is just as we saw in chapter 8. We had some references to this, and maybe a little bit of this in chapter 7 as well. Yep. So, the Ptolemies are ruling in Egypt, which are going to be called the Southern Kingdom, or often the kings of the south. And likewise, the Seleucids are going to be called the kings of the north. And as I said, we're going to see back and forth, back and forth. They're constantly rivaling each other for land and for power. Okay. Now, starting in verse 5, the king of the south shall be strong. Okay, we know that's Ptolemy, king of the south. One of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And this is going to be Seleucus here in Syria in the north. 6, in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in those times. Don't be confused by this. It's very simple to look at history and see what happens. Ptolemy gives his daughter to Seleucus, hoping to make a treaty or to gain some power, while instead the daughter's murdered. Verse 7, out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army. This is her brother, the daughter that was murdered. Her brother shall come with an army, shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. So in retaliation, her brother's going to invade Syria and have a great victory. Verse 8, he shall carry captives unto Egypt, their gods with their princes and their precious vessels of gold, silver and gold. He shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come to his kingdom and shall return to his own land. Now, the rest of the chapter goes on the same way. We just have to decide how much of the history we think is important. Now, as Brian said back in Daniel chapter 9, starting in verses 24 to the end of the chapter, that's the greatest prophecy of all time, and the fulfillment of it is the greatest fulfillment. It's the thing that God had intended from the beginning when he knew that there had to be a reconciliation for sin. That's what all of this is leading up to, all the types and the shadows and the laws and the sacrifices. That's what's really important. I think what we want to see out of Daniel chapter 11 is just what Gabriel is telling Daniel. God is causing all this to happen. Remember, he's telling Daniel all of this before it ever happens. All we're doing is looking and seeing exactly how it played out in history, only now we can put names to it and see how amazing it is that God providentially causes it to happen. That the kingdom falls into four, that these two are going to be the most strong and they're going to battle, that one's going to give his daughter in marriage, but she's going to be killed. I mean, to not only prophesy that, but to see it all play out is very exciting, because we see that God truly does have his hand in the lives of men here on the earth.
So in chapter 9, we see God's timeline for what he wants to accomplish, and then we see in chapter 10, he's telling us what's going to happen in the world during that same time. That this is all that's going to happen as these nations rise up and go down, and God's the one that's providentially in control of bringing up kings and putting down kings, and telling you how things are going to play out in these next 490 years till Jesus comes.
Now, he mentions that 490 years. We know that there's nothing scriptural that we have recorded in that last 400 years between the Old and the New Testaments, but God is showing us what will play out during that time, and we know from history that it did in the world, right? Okay, now, verse 10. His sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up, even to his own fortress. So we see here that Seleucus and another branch of the family by the name of Antiochus, both of Syria, are going to now start to try to conquer again. Verse 11, the king of the south, this would be Ptolemy, shall be moved with choler or anger, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he has taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. And this is a way of saying that Ptolemy is going to defeat Antiochus and Seleucus, it says, with great loss, history says. So they were attacked by the kings of the north, but they overcame them. Verse 13, the king of the north shall return. He shall set forth a multitude greater than the former. He shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. So this is 14 years later, Antiochus returns to Egypt with an even greater army. Now, so much time is passing here. It's not Ptolemy the first. I mean, this is subsequent generations. Now, we're all the way down to Antiochus the third. And I don't have time to tell you how much time is passing or exactly who all these people are, but if you keep the family name straight, you'll know if it's the north or the south. Verse 14, in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. So many will be fighting Ptolemy. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. These are Jews, especially apostate Jews, who join themselves with Antiochus to fight against Egypt, to fight against Ptolemy. Verse 15, so the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount and take the most fenced cities. And the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. So Antiochus defeats Ptolemy in Egypt. 16, but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will. None shall stand before him. He shall stand in the glorious land by which his hand shall be consumed. Antiochus now is going to conquer Palestine. He's going to go back to his own general area of Syria. He is going to conquer Palestine, where we think of as God's people are living. And the key we're going to get through the rest of this chapter, we're going to get to Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, who is going to be the one we've already talked about, the vile person, the little horn who is going to rise up against God's people with a great persecution. We're not to Antiochus IV yet, but we're almost there. Verse 17, he shall set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. He shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. This is very interesting. Antiochus in the north has a daughter named Cleopatra. He is going to give his daughter in marriage to Ptolemy, king of the south. But thinking he has corrupted her into entering into this marriage so she could then act treacherously toward her husband in Egypt, really working for the cause of her father. But instead, she stays true to her husband and stands for Ptolemy and will not help her father to conquer the south. So verse 18, after this, he, Antiochus, shall turn his face to the isles, and he shall take many. So now he's going to move into Asia Minor, into Greece, into the islands of the Mediterranean. He's going to start conquering. But for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. He shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So as he is he's invading and trying to defeat these other lands, he is withstood by the Roman army, and he returns home, and he is slain in his home. Now we want to start thinking, Greece is strong here, so was strong with Alexander, fell into these four parts, two of which were the strongest and are conquering each other, trying to battle each other continually. But remember the statue, we're working down through the statue down to the feet and the toes. So now we're getting this picture of coming toward the end of Greece, and Rome is going to start rising in power, and we're going to see them again before we get to the end of this chapter. Now again, we don't see the word Rome, we don't see the word Antiochus, but it's so clear, the details are so clear that from history, I've picked up some history books just to see what they said in the last few weeks, and it's exactly this. This is exactly what it says. So it's just really fascinating. So Antiochus III is slain. Well, verse 20, then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. So this is another Seleucus in that dynasty. He reigned 11 or 12 years, and then he was poisoned. So not destroyed in battle or anything like that. Now, verse 21, we get to our key here. In his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. He was not the heir to the throne. He did not have a place of honor in that he had any legal right to be there. But he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Now, this is Antiochus IV, called Epiphanes, which means God manifest. He actually acted as if he was God on the earth. Verse 22, with the arms of a flood shall they be overthrown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. He's overthrowing his enemies, and I believe because the next several verses holds a passage about Egypt, that he's speaking here of overcoming Egypt and the covenant, or this treaty that had been made with Egypt by those in his dynasty, that he is going to break league with. Verse 23, after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. He shall come up, he shall be strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province. He shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches. Yea, he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even for a time. He shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. He's coming against Egypt. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. So the Ptolemy that's reigning in the south is going to be defeated, not so much by Antiochus, but by the treachery and deceit and treason of his own people. 26, yea, they that feed the portion of his meat shall destroy him, his own people. His army shall overflow, many shall fall down slain. 27, both these kings' hearts of the north and the south shall be to do mischief. They shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet the end shall be at the time appointed. And this was historical too. Interesting. Antiochus and Ptolemy literally come together, one knowing he's been defeated, one knowing he is the conqueror. Yet they come together civilly and friendly, speaking lies to each other. Speaking friendship, but actually both are speaking deceitfully and with lies, probably both trying to save their own lives or to come out with the greater power. But it says, for the end shall be at the time appointed. And we're going to see a phrase or something similar to that at least a half a dozen times, because as he's going to explain, it's God who is orchestrating this event. And this event and that thing will happen or will continue until God says it has been fulfilled, or until this time has been appointed for the end. So 28, then shall he return to his land with great riches. Antiochus is going back to Syria. His heart shall be against the holy covenant, against the Jews. He shall do exploits and return to his own land. Antiochus, when he leaves Egypt, he attacks Jerusalem. He slays 80,000. He takes 40,000, and he sells 40,000 Jews into slavery. So why he turns against the Jews at that time, historians don't understand it. But we see here that God has prophesied that this will happen. 29, at the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. So next time he returns to Egypt, he's not going to conquer as he did before. And why is that? Verse 30, for the ships of Chittim shall come against him. The Roman army withstands him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. He's going to direct his anger toward Jerusalem, toward the saints of God. And those who are apostate Jews or rebellious are going, some of them will ally themselves to him. 31, arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Does anyone know what he does to pollute the sanctuary? Who remembers?
Sacrifices a pig.
That's right. He sacrifices a pig on God's altar in the temple, an unclean animal. 32, such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. These are those that aren't truly serving God. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. So the true saints are standing firm in the truth. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. So we see the persecution of the saints.
Can I jump in for a second? The people that have knowledge and are strong and do exploits, that might be referring to the Maccabean uprising, where they resisted and they became independent for some season there.
Right. I'm coming to some of that.
Okay.
But yes, that's definitely true. Verse 34, when they shall fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries or treachery. Some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, to purge and make them white, even till the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. And I believe this means that it was a time of purifying, because those who are truly serving God will stand for truth. And those who are wavering, they're not going to stand for truth because they don't want to suffer the persecution or the sword or the captivity. But again, we have that phrase, it is yet for a time appointed. It's not the end. 36, the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. He shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. So it's in God's timing that all of this will come to an end. 37, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, or it literally translates munitions, like the God of power and force, and like a fortified wall. And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. And everyone agrees that this God specifically was Jupiter, the Roman god of war. And we see the influences of Rome beginning to come into the empire. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. He shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. So he's promoting his God, and he's prospering those who follow. Now, verse 40, at the time of the end, we're coming to the end of this, shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen and with many ships. So this is Egypt and Syria battling once again. He, Antiochus, shall enter into the countries, shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and Ethiopians shall be at his steps, or under his command. Here's the end of him, verse 44. Tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. So he's going to be distracted by disturbances in other places. He's going to go to do battle. He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So the fulfillment of time of this situation, of this person, has come. And who can help him? Who can stand? He was not a righteous man that God caused to be evil to bring about his purpose. He was a very wicked man. Now, as Brian was saying earlier, after this time of the desecration of the temple and during the time of the persecution of the true saints, over a period of time, decades, there's this family led by a man named, or a family name of Maccabees, which this came to be known as the Maccabean Revolt, where many of the true Jews were trying to take back their city. And they were constantly fighting not only against Antiochus, but also against the apostate Jews who were spying and who were on the side of Antiochus. Well, eventually they do take back the temple. They cleanse the temple and dedicate it and purify it for true service toward God, which I learned that was the beginning of Hanukkah. I never knew what Hanukkah was. That was when the Maccabees had cleansed the temple. Well, it was during that time when Antiochus had discovered that the city had been taken or the temple had been reclaimed and it had been cleansed, he sends his armies to go and withstand the Maccabeans and those who were fighting with them. And that's when it says he came to his end and none shall help him. So that was the time of his death, before he could get his armies there to try to withstand that revolt. Isn't that exciting? That's an earful. I know, I commend you for sitting through all that. But I think it's amazing to me to see how God can plan out such details and then implement them in the lives of people and nations and kings and rulers and common people. But I think we need to understand who came out the best in all that. Who came out the best? Well, we see God would be glorified because his prophecies came true. So we see that everything was true that he said. We see it's true that he is interested in the lives of the people and the power that's happening here on the earth. But what's most exciting to me was verse 32. The people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And many of them will be persecuted, but it says they're going to be tried and purged and made white. And this is what we see, is that even in times of trouble, God is with us. Even in times of persecution, or here we saw it was even more than persecution, that God was with them and they stood strong. And it wasn't so much that they couldn't overcome the pressure from their enemies, but they stood firm in the truth.
It seems like to me as well that as these evil people that are leading these nations are fighting each other, they're kind of keeping each other in check. Well, I go and they fight him, and he comes down and he fights against them. And I've often
And the Romans
thought
withstood them both.
about the Muslim nations. When they're fighting each other, they kind of keep each other in check. Maybe God's using that to, you diminish their power and their ability. Then they come down and they diminish them, and kind of keep things in check, where God's governing over all, to keep this world to continue on, so that he can fulfill the prophecies that he's made, and he can continue it on to reap a harvest of souls in the earth. So I see it a lot of times with God using one power to keep another power in check, so they don't become too strong and keep sin in check. They attack them, and God's there. He's with his. He spoke of the angel that was battling with the king of Persia and fighting with the king of Grecia. Well, what would he be doing except trying to get those leaders to do his will? And some of that will is to just fight among each other and keep each other in check, I believe, that so that God can keep this world going and try to get people saved, to follow him, and to have a people that he harvests out of the earth.
I think he uses them to bring judgment upon each other as well.
That's true too, for sure.
But before we go on to chapter 12, why don't we just finish our history? What happens here when we saw that Rome was starting to get a little powerful? They're withstanding the king of the north. They're withstanding the king of the south. They have this last battle against each other. Well, think about it. Anybody know, here's some trivia for you, who was the last Ptolemy to rule in Egypt? The last Grecian pharaoh. Very last one. It was Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra, like you see in the Liz Taylor movie. She was the very last Greek to rule as pharaoh in Egypt. And who was she in league with, or what was her downfall? The Romans, right? She had so much of a relationship with the Romans. She knew they were powerful, trying to make league with them, marrying them, having their children, so that she could somehow retain the power of her kingdom. But Rome does eventually spread out, conquer everything. There's no one left. But Cleopatra dies, it's just like 30 BC. I mean, it's right before the time of Christ, maybe about the time Christ is even being, people are starting to watch for his coming because they know the times. So this is what's playing out in that 400 years that we don't have specific details of.
Okay, chapter 12, and we'll finish Daniel. And at that time shall Michael stand up, This is at the end of these 490 years. The great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And we can find that time of trouble when Jesus comes in Matthew 24:21. There's going to be a time of trouble because the Jews do not accept their Christ. Matthew 24:21. We mentioned this earlier, how Titus is coming with the Roman armies. He's bringing the judgment of God upon Jerusalem. And the Christians were told in this passage by Jesus, when you see the armies coming surrounding Jerusalem, that's the time to get out, to go to the hills. And we see just before that in verse 20 here, pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, because the Jews didn't allow anyone to walk at any great distance on the Sabbath day, or certainly to move any goods or leave the city with anything. So pray that that time when Titus comes and surrounds the city with armies, that won't be in the winter when it would be harder to travel, or on a Sabbath day when the Jews wouldn't allow travel. For then, at that time, shall a great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And there has not been anything done to one city at one time as was done at 70 A.D., when over 1 million people were slaughtered, starved, and then slaughtered by the sword. And there's great detail in Josephus' writings how blood just flowed everywhere. There was just slain bodies, parts, blood all over the place, just a massacre of people. And there's never been such a thing happen to any city at one particular time as that. And you could talk about what happened with the Jews in the Holocaust, but it never happened at once, all at once, like it happened in Jerusalem, in one taking of a city. And then 1 million people went captive. So this is the tribulation that's coming on a nation, on a people, on a city, on a particular day that has never happened and never will happen again to that degree. So this is tribulation comes. They reject their Messiah, 70 A.D. One generation after the rejection of Christ, their city is taken from them, and there's great judgment upon that people. And my mind always goes back to what they said when Pilate said, would you have me release this man or not? And they said, no, crucify him, and let his blood be on us and on our children's children. They cried out to God to have it happen to them. So that's how hard their heart was against God. Let his blood be on us and on our children. So what is God going to do when someone's so stout against him as that? But he brings the judgment that they deserve. So never was there such judgment to any people as to the Jews at that time. But at that time thy people shall be delivered, who? Everyone that shall be found written in the book. Now the book is God's book of life. Those who have accepted Christ as the Messiah, those people will be delivered. They'll see the armies. So at that time of destruction on Jerusalem, everyone that's found written in the book will be delivered. Now also speaking of that time after Christ comes and he does his work, many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. Here's the end of prophecy. Here's the last great prophecy of Christ, and now there's going to be an end. they're not going to hear from God anymore until the Messiah comes. There's no more books written in that 400-year period prior to Christ's coming. So seal up the book. The time of prophecy won't be open again until after Christ comes and John is given the revelation. Seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Now, the opening of the book, again, we can go to Revelation chapter 5, verse 1. So you can link those two together, Daniel 12:4, and then Revelation 5. Back to Daniel chapter 12, verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, one on this side of the bank of the river, and on the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders, even to the, and I believe this is, even to the end of the world, till the time of the church age? And the time of the church age. And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and sware by him that liveth for ever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. And this is the same measure that we get in the book of Revelation for the church age. How long will the world go on then? And what will be the time of the church age until the time of the end? We're never given a specific time. We're always given this partial time. This time, times and a half, or 3.5. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard it, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Daniel, these things won't happen in your lifetime. Verse 10, Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Now verse 11, And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. 1,290 days roughly fits into the 3.5 years that Jesus' ministry was, from the time that he was anointed till the time that he is offered up. And it's an abomination that for the Jews, because they shouldn't be killing their own Messiah. So that roughly fits in that time frame. Then we see, Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,330 days, which is 1,335 days, which is 45 days beyond what was said in verse 11. So Jesus is put to death. That's an abomination. But then blessed is he that comes to the 45 days after that. Now that's close to the day of Pentecost, but it doesn't seem to be exactly fit that day. So I think the answer lies somewhere there with understanding if you can get the exact days of from what point is God telling us this measurement to the next point. But I haven't been able to figure out that exactly to my satisfaction. But verse 13 says, Go thou thy way, Daniel, till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days.